Wife demanded I sell my inherited childhood home for a 6-month vacation, throws a tantrum and leaves when I refuse, now crawling back after learning its huge value. Hey, guys. So I, 33M, have been married to my wife, whom we'll call Mindy, 30F, for about 3 years. She and I met through a couple of friends, several years ago, and after dating for almost 4 years, we decided to get married. Mindy and I have a lot in common, including the fact that we were both bankers. But after we got married, she quit her job to join her friend who was starting a business. She had saved enough, and I had told her that I was going to support her, which I did. She had always wanted a business of her own since her parents had also been entrepreneurs. But unfortunately, they have not been very successful. So they have a small-scale makeup and beauty business which is pretty much limited to the locals. But Mindy wanted to do something bigger and I was supportive of her. I, myself, come from a business background as well, but unfortunately, I have never really taken an interest. My parents are really wealthy, and I grew up very rich. My grandfather started a bakery business a long time ago, and then my dad took over when he was old enough, and that's when the company really started flourishing. We're doing pretty well, but the company is going to go to my brother and not me. I don't mind it, I don't want it anyway. I'm happy with the job that I have and I want to stick to it. Unfortunately, my parents passed away a couple of months ago. My dad had been suffering from a lot of heart problems for a really long time, and it was a cardiac arrest that finally got him. My mother had just passed away during the pandemic, and it was just a generally really difficult time for our family. Mindy had been great throughout, and I was really happy that I had somebody to count in this difficult time. My brother and I were the ones who had to sort out his affairs after he passed away because it was really sudden and we hadn't seen it coming. My brother is a couple of years older than I am, and while we were speaking to our parents' lawyer, he told us that now, he was finally allowed to reveal what our parents had left to us. Apparently, they had a clause that as long as one parent was surviving, we would not be inheriting anything. But now that both of them were gone, it was finally time to read the wills. I think it was a pretty interesting approach, but Mindy didn't really care for it and said that it was diabolical. Either way, the probate process of my father's will was completed only recently, and only then did we find out the contents of the will. It was no big surprise that my parents had been so dramatic about this whole thing because they always had been a fan of the theatrics, so this was quite expected. Along with the clause that said that only after both of them had passed away would the wills be read, there was another clause that stated that it could only be done after the probate period was over and both my brother and I had to be present in the same room for it. I thought it was fun because it really made me feel like I was in a movie or something, but as usual, Mindy didn't like it one bit. I wasn't surprised that she wasn't enjoying this process because she had never really liked my parents because she said that they made her nervous and she felt like they were always looking down on her. I didn't think that was the case at all, and I had tried to convince her of it several times, but she never bought it. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, my brother and I finally met for the reading of the wills and we were told that all the property would be divided equally between us. And while my brother would be inheriting the business, which was natural because he had been handling it while my father was sick, I would be inheriting their house. And by their house, I mean the sprawling estate that my parents used to live in. My childhood home was worth quite a lot and I was really happy that they had left it to me. Other than that, all the money that they had left would also be split equally between us, and whatever other properties that they had which weren't listed in the paperwork specifically would be sold and the money would be given to charity. My brother and I were completely fine with it because I think they had been more than fair and equal, but Mindy had a problem with it because she felt like the business should also have been left to me and we could run it together as partners. I didn't think that was going to work because, for starters, I didn't have any interest in running my parents' bakery business. As I said, I was quite content with the job that I had. It paid well and I was in a pretty high position, so I had nothing to worry about. Besides, my brother had actually put in the work and effort into understanding how the company works and knew everything about the business. I don't think it would have been fair for my parents to leave it to both of us and let us run it as partners. He deserved to be the sole owner because he had worked for it. And I knew that he could reach even greater heights than my father had because he had amazing business acumen, and I was proud of my brother. He and I have a really great relationship as well, so I was sure that if I was ever in any trouble, he would bail me out, no questions asked. But for some reason, Mindy didn't really like whatever was going on. However, she was pacified by the fact that I had inherited the mansion. It was worth quite a lot, not to mention the fact that it was quite old since my great-grandfather, my mother's dad, had built it a really long time ago. My mother's family was pretty rich too, since I think they came from aristocracy or something. I'm not really sure about the history, but I do know that they were pretty rich. It also helped that my mother's dad was one of the best lawyers of his time. So that was generational wealth, and my mother's family members had all maintained it through their work. It's important that I mention how hard my parents had worked, in spite of their generational wealth, which I admit, did give them an advantage over others, but they never looked down on anybody who was not as financially well off as them, and they raised me to be the same way. But anyhow, when Mindy found out that I was going to inherit their estate, she instantly started insisting that we sell that place for a great price, and then we go on a vacation with the money. It was kind of silly because we could afford to go on vacation anyway, but she didn't want a normal vacation. Like other people, she wanted us to both quit our jobs and just take off for several months. She said that she wanted to do a world tour, which wouldn't be possible if we were chained to our desks. But if we sold the property that my parents had left to me, we would be easily able to afford traveling for months, and then we could just come back and find new jobs. I thought that it was a crazy plan. And more than it being downright ridiculous, I didn't even want to quit my job. I love the place where I worked, and I really like the people that I worked with. But I can't say the same for Mindy. She was the kind of person who hated having to work. I couldn't even blame her because even though she had joined her friend in the business that they had set up together, it wasn't really doing as well as they had expected. My wife was the one who handled the finances for the business, and she would constantly be complaining about how long it was taking them to crack the code on how to actually scale up and become really profitable. They were doing okay, but it was just not good enough for her because she was getting paid less than she used to at the bank. And I was getting really frustrated with her. I could understand that. I really respected her for putting so much work into building something of her own, but at the same time, I could only sympathize with her. I didn't want to quit my job because I enjoyed my work, and I didn't think it was fair for her to demand that I do so just so she could have what she wanted. So I put my foot down, and I told her that I would not be selling the property for any cost. More than not wanting to take a 6-month-long vacation, I just didn't want to sell my childhood home. It held a lot of sentimental value to me, and I really didn't think it was fair to ask me to sell something that meant so much to me so we could go on a vacation. When I declined, Mindy got really mad at me and she called me a bunch of things. She said that I was selfish, and she shouldn't have expected any better. Because after all, I was my parents' kid and I was doing the same thing to her that they had done all their lives, looking down upon her. She claimed that she wasn't even asking for much, but I thought it was a lot. I also didn't like the fact that she was calling me selfish just because I wanted to continue working at the job that I had and didn't want to sell my home. She was being ridiculous and I told her so she completely lost her mind that day and we had the worst argument of our relationship. We had never ever felt the way that we did that day, and even I had never lost my temper at her like that. We said a lot of horrible mean things to each other and were trying to make each other feel bad. So after a while, she just packed up her things and left the house to live with her parents. She told me that she wouldn't be coming back unless and until I changed my mind about the vacation. Apparently, this was no longer about the vacation, this was about the principle. She said that I was never willing to make sacrifices for her or prioritize our marriage, and she was getting sick of it. I didn't even know what she was talking about at that point, because that seemed like a lot of BS that she was coming up with on the spot to make me feel bad and guilt-trip me into agreeing with her. Even when I did ask, for an example, of when exactly I had put her down, she couldn't come up with anything. It was just a stupid argument fueled by nothing but rage. And I really do regret it because I love my wife and I would want her to come back. But the things that she said were really cruel and unnecessary. She made me feel like I was the villain for simply not wanting to quit my job just because she hated her own. She also said a lot of things about my parents, which I thought was a low blow. They were gone now, and they would not be able to defend themselves. And call me sensitive, but I think it's in bad taste to speak ill of the dead. I didn't even know where half of it was coming from, because she said that my parents had apparently always looked down on her and made her feel inferior just because she didn't come from a wealthy family and didn't belong to the same class of people that they did. I mean, I had literally no idea what she was referring to because as far as I was concerned, my parents had always been perfect as to her, and my parents were not the kind of people who judge others on the basis of wealth. They were not like that, which is why I had not been raised to feel the same way. And I knew that for a fact. Anyone who knew my parents would vouch for it. It was just all of that combined, her insulting my parents and calling me selfish for things that I was not even supposed to feel bad about, that led me to make the decision that I would not contact her unless she reached out to me first. The fight that we had was really personal, so I hadn't told anybody about it. Including my brother, even though we are really close. And I think that's where I made a mistake, because a couple of days ago, apparently, my brother couldn't reach me on my phone because I was in a meeting and he had something really important to tell me. He didn't know about the fact that my wife and I were fighting, so he called Mindy instead and told her what he wanted to talk to me about. I had told my brother to do a little research and find out how much the property would be worth if I actually did plan on selling it. He had a couple of friends who worked in real estate and he spoke to them and found out the amount that I had. The estimate was actually just only half of what the property was worth. Apparently, the kind of architecture that the house had was hot right now and buyers would be lining up. One of his realtor friends had even claimed that he could